can't get out of my bed. There's a thought crime running through my head. Can't take these rules, and people are fools who believe what they read and believe what they see, believe what they see on the TV. Opinions are like iPhones, everybody's got one.
Hello, welcome to the first of two bonus episodes of Glass Onion on John Lennon. So today and next week we're going to be taking a break from the usual format. I've already got the next regular episode in the can, so that'll be in 2 weeks, I think. But today I'm including, with the permission of Julian Charles of the Mind Renewed, an episode of his program that I did where I was talking about my own music. Now, it's funny, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking my natural instinct would say I'm going to shamelessly plug my own music. And I know that phrase is meant kind of jokingly, but I was sort of thinking, well, why does I have to have any shame in plugging my own music? How would anyone know about it if I didn't let them know that it existed? And, you know, I've put this podcast together. It's a fair amount of work, you know, editing mainly, as I've said before. I'm not going to go down that road again. But you know, I worked hard at my music as well. In the 4 years in Madrid, 4.5 years, something like that, I made 3 studio albums and 2 live albums with some wonderful collaborators who I talk about on this, namely Kester Jones, David Ernstberger and Ernesto Pestana. And there were other people involved as well. And I was thinking about something else. I've had virtually all positive feedback on this show, but I had one person who was complaining that one of the episodes was about the Beatles rather than John Lennon. And I was thinking, okay, I'll start worrying when, you know, the podcast police start knocking down my door and getting their handcuffs out. But, you know, I was thinking, fucking hell, people, you know, there's enough rules in the world, you know, our lives are just governed by the rules we know about, and then all the hundreds that are being created every day that we don't know about. I'll allow myself that luxury. Yeah, the other thing I was talking about, I was Skyping yesterday with my friend Joe, who I know listened to this show, and as I told him last night, it's wonderful to think that I'm part of his list of podcasts to listen to while he's at work or whatever he's doing. So hi to Joe. We were talking last night about monetizing and things, and I've never really considered it. I might consider it in the future, I don't know. I was telling Joe that I heard Sam Harris talk about this on his podcast last year or something, about how we have to almost feel guilty about trying to get money for labours. So, yeah, the way the culture has changed, this sort of free culture. I mean, it's not actually a free culture if you think about it. A lot of the things that are free, you're being exposed to advertising, which, you know, if advertising didn't work, it wouldn't be like $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar industry. So there's a cost to everything. There's no such thing as a free lunch, as they say. You know, and if you think of low-cost airlines like Ryanair, if you go to England, they deposit you in Stansted in Middlesex, I think. And then you've got to find your way from Stansted to presumably London. I guess most people are ending up in London. So you've got the cost of a bus. Also, there's time cost as well. You know, we always just think of cost in terms of money, but there's other types of cost. Anyway, so we were talking about that, and it just got me thinking about it, that how we adapt so quickly to changing cultures and norms, you know, ways of thinking about things. I hope all that didn't sound too much like a rant. Just about to apologise, actually. Remember, if you grow up in England, you have to remember to apologise for everything. But, you know, I just get on this mic and do my intros, and however I feel, I just kind of go with it. Anyway, so let's get on to this show. I don't really have to say too much, because Julian introduces it. As he says, he and I have talked many times. We've never met in the flesh, but just one thing, though. This interview was done, both parts were done on a single day in July. And for context, people who have listened to this show since then will know that I went to India in August. So obviously, just bear in mind that this was before then. So I was kind of talking about that. And you'll notice my plans didn't work out as I thought. Didn't stay in India, actually came home early in the end. So I'll hand you now over to Julian Charles. So there'll be both parts of the interview. I'll just leave there's a very short pause between the two. The first part is talking about my latest album, which is called Through Life. And the second one is talking about my previous album, my second album, which is called Adventures in Retrospect. I'll be back at the end just very, very briefly to tell you about the next episode. So I'll see you on the other side. Enjoy.
Julian Charles here of themindsrenewed.com, coming to you as usual from the depths of the Lancashire countryside here in the UK, and today I am delighted to say that we're joined again by Antony Rituno, who's been on TMR many times in the past to talk about all kinds of subjects. All kinds. I won't bother to go into the list of things because I'm just inviting listeners to go and check that out for yourselves. Anyway, it's always a delight to speak to Antony. He's a teacher, a blogger, a musician, a thinker, originally from the UK, but now living and working in Spain. Although at the moment I'm going to be talking to him in the UK, but he's shortly to travel to India, and we'll have something more to say about that in a minute. Anyway, Antony, good to have you back on the programme.
Hi, Julian. How are you?
I'm very well, actually. Thank you. Very well indeed.
Can I pull you up on a couple of things?
Yeah, do.
I'm now a podcaster as well.
Oh, yeah, you're a podcaster as well. That's right.
And I've left Spain as well.
You've actually left Spain for good now?
Yeah, I've bolted for good, yeah. Well, I mean, I could go back in theory, but...
How long were you there for?
5.5 years.
5.5 years. And you were teaching English as a foreign language over there, mainly?
Yeah, that's right. Teaching a bit of music as well. I had a few guitar students. Well, in fact, when you featured my thing about conspiracies, that was something like April 2014. That was when I first got there. So
wow, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You've been on the journey with me.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yes, we've known each other for a long time, haven't we now?
Yeah, we have, yeah. We might meet one day. Yeah.
You never know. We have tried a couple of times to arrange it, but it hasn't worked out.
Yeah.
Okay, so why are you going to India then? What's all that about?
Well, what can I say? As I said, I've reached a bit of a crossroads. Finished a relationship. Well, it was finished. I mean, India is something, I don't know, it's always been in my mind to go there. There's very few places in the world that I was sort of been hankering to go to at some point in my life, but India's always one. Inevitably, with my life, it's the Beatles. There's a Beatles connection. They went to India, and I might actually get to a place called Rishikesh, which is where they went. But, I spent quite a few years in Asia, in Thailand and Laos. And obviously, India is not the same as Thailand, but I suppose there are things that are common to Asia itself. The best aspects of Thailand, that was a kind of a throwback to maybe a more, innocent age. A lot of things seem more organic there. But mostly, I mean, everyone who's been to India says, they feel like it's the kind of place that I would enjoy. I mean, there's going to be negative things, I'm sure, to see a lot of poverty and things, but I think it's just all part of the experience, and I've never sort of shied away from exposure to the darker sides of life and everything.
No.
So,
and what are you going to be doing when you're out there? You're going to be teaching essentially again, are you?
Well, no, I've just booked a 6-week trip, essentially backpacking, similar to what I did. If you remember, went to Colombia 4 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
You took nothing there, pretty much nothing but a guitar or something, didn't you, when you went there?
Yeah. Well, all I'm taking. Really, my main goal is just to experience every moment of the India trip, because I've done quite a lot of traveling, but I went backpacking around the world when I was 25, which is 18 years ago. And to be perfectly honest, I kind of was just going from place to place, all these recommended places, and I never really gave myself the time to just be there and be alive to it, which is kind of the point of backpacking. Backpackers are occasionally a bit snobby about, tourists, going somewhere for 2 weeks. We're backpackers, but the spirit of backpacking and traveling, quote unquote, is to not really head for the tourist places. I mean, the only one I'm going to go to is a Taj Mahal, and purely because it's like an hour away from Delhi or something. I wouldn't traipse across the country to go to that.
Okay, so I got the idea that you were going to go there sort of permanently, really, and that you were going to teach. But before we got on air, you talked about the possibility of coming back to the UK permanently. Is that right?
Yeah, well, my plan for India is just to be alive to sort of any possibilities. And I kind of have a sneaking feeling I might end up staying there a bit longer. I mean, I did voluntary work before in Thailand, teaching in a slum area, which was very, very rewarding. And India offers so many possibilities. And they drive on the left, so
yes,
too cowardly to ever try and drive on the right. So I think I drove on the right for about half an hour in Vietnam in about 2001. But I'm training to be a life coach online, which is sort of quite a natural transition from teaching, because a lot of English teaching, and a lot of teachers will tell you this, you feel almost like a sort of counselor / therapist at times, because a lot of students, for example, stressed businessmen and businesswomen, they kind of use the English class to get stuff off their chest while practicing English.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
The best teachers, I think, have a sort of sympathetic way about them, and a good way of empathizing. And
you've had a long interest in psychology, haven't you, as well, which fits into that nicely.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And, therapy and mental health, it all goes to that. But yeah, I had a great time in Spain. I've been to Italy, I've been to Thailand. But, I am English at the end of the day. And I do feel like at the age of 43, I do want to maybe put some roots back down in England,
Absolutely, yeah.
Anyway.
So, okay, we're going to be talking about your new album. We have mentioned the fact that you are a musician, and we've played some of your stuff on the Mind Review before. We've never really concentrated on it as a thing in itself, have we? And I just thought, having heard your latest album, what a great opportunity this would be to talk about the music itself. So thanks for agreeing. So it's called Through Life. You and your fellow musicians have created this year, 2019, but you've got previous albums, which we've mentioned. Adventures in Retrospect, which was 2017, and before that, Butterfly Dreams, 2016, which I understand is a collection of songs that you wrote quite a long time ago. And in between, you've got these live sessions, which I have to admit that I've not actually heard, and all this is, I think, available on Bandcamp, which I'll be putting links to, of course, in the show notes. Anyway, Through Life, your latest album, I was really taken with. Liked it very much, and I thought it would be great to talk about it. And because I liked Adventures in Retrospect as well, and particularly in terms of themes, some of the sort of truthy themes that come out in that. And you keep
snuck a few in there.
Yeah, you did indeed, which we'll come to, because we talk in a minute. But there's some of that still in Through Life, that arguably perhaps not quite so obvious as it was in Adventures in Retrospect. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to be talking about some of these songs, hopefully playing some of them, and encouraging people to go and take a listen, which would be really good.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, so perhaps you could tell us, what would you say is the theme? And don't just say, well, it's about life. You've got to tell us a bit more about that. What would you say is the theme beyond that sort of trivial statement? Oh, it's about life.
I think it's just about life.
No, I knew you were going to say.
Sorry. Timing, eh? I do want to shout out to some of my collaborators, because some of them are fantastic. Absolutely. And there's a lady called Vesta Runzaville, who's an American lady who lives in Madrid, and she's done all my posters for my gigs, online posters.
Did she do the artwork for the album?
Yeah, she did. And
that's lovely. Really nice.
Oh, I mean, she's amazing. I call her like an ideas machine. I think it's less truthy because it's basically more personal.
Okay.
It's always quite an eclectic mix. On my last album, the one before, I had like a bossa nova song. I had like a reggae, sort of white man's reggae, we called it, song. And there's a bit of blues, there's a bit of country. 3 or 4 of them are to do with the lady I was in a relationship with. They reflect my relationship with her. In fact, song number 8, Ballad in G, is supposed to be an answer or a continuation of song number 5. And one of them is sort of very slow and emotional, and then the other one is a sort of fast country song. So it's almost like reflecting the two sides of my relationship with Nina, my ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
One, the sort of very romantic side, and then the other one is the fun side. The fun side of being in a relationship and being in love with somebody. So I would say the themes really are personal. I mean, Through Life was actually the first song that was written. Should I talk about that now? Or?
In a minute. I mean, you say they're not all written by you. I mean, are you mainly the lyricist, or do you also write the music? I mean, obviously, I suppose as you're a group of musicians, there'll be an element of improvisations. It's not all going to be down to one person anyway. But do you create the basis of most of the music as well?
No, I mean, the songs are mine. I mean, my producer and the guitarist who was in the Backfield Plan, which was my band, he's called Kester Jones. I'd like to talk about him in a minute. What generally we do is, sometimes I'll have a complete song and we just do a demo and record it. Sometimes, because he's a musical genius, I would call him. He would sometimes give me a couple of chords. So for the song Through Life, I wanted to have some diminished and augmented chords, but I'm not really very good with that. So I said, oh, what would be a good chord? So I gave him an E major, and I said, what would you use here for the end of this? And I would say, should I use a diminished or augmented? And he'd give me, you should use a diminished here. So they're kind of production songwriting things, but they are basically my songs. I mean, there were a couple of co-writes on my previous albums, but basically 8 of the songs are mine, and then 1 was written by an old friend of mine who's a school friend, and then 1 is a cover. So,
talking about chords there, I've got to just ask. Every now and again, you get an added 6th chord that's chucked in right at the end of the song. And sometimes I think it really, really fits. And other times I'm thinking, ooh, where did that come from? Out of the blue. Yeah. Whose idea was that?
Well, have a guess which 60s band might have done that before me. I'm afraid it's the boys from Liverpool again.
Gosh.
Yeah, right. I'm afraid so, yeah. If you listen to songs like She Loves You, originally they had She Loves You, it was ending on, I can't remember the end chord, maybe a G, but and then someone in the band, I think George Harrison said, came up with the idea of a 6th, which they were all a bit embarrassed by because they felt it belonged to sort of an arcane age.
Yes, it has a sort of cheesy quality to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but somehow they made it valid. And
yes.
Kester, the producer, and I, we know a lot of the same stuff, so he recognised that as a Beatles thing rather than a sort of 30s or 40s thing, so we shamelessly used it.
Okay, so it's Through Life, which is song number 4. That is one that does in fact have in the guitar an added 6th right at the end, which I think does work really well actually, because it's that kind of song. It's got a lot of chromaticism in it and close harmonies and that sort of thing, so I think it does work. All right, let's talk about this one. So some of the lyrics here that I picked up, I haven't got them written in front of me. So through life we complicate matters, our hopes and dreams are shattered, we stifle each other. And then, of course, there is this rhetorical question, what is this thing called love? So I guess to sort of kick this off, how does love relate to the problems that you have in the verses there? Hopes and dreams shattered, and we complicate everything, but there's this thing called love.
Well, I think because that's the bridge. I always think of the bridge. The Beatles used to call it the middle 8 because it often had 8 bars. I often think of that as maybe a little bit apart from the rest of the song. I mean, the verses, it's supposed to be a kind of a wry thing. So the lyrics sound very negative. We complicate matters, we stifle each other, etc. Often I write stuff where the lyrics sound quite negative, but the songs sound quite jaunty. I don't think it sounds like a negative song, does it?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't really. No, it sounds like, almost like music theatre or something. I suppose, and when it starts, you get that sort of vamping with a repeated chord progression that you have there.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of Barbershop Quartet, actually, with your close harmonies in there.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. I discovered a band called the Ink Spots last year. They're amazing because if you listen to their greatest hits, which is like 30 songs, it's basically the same song 30 times. They just get away with it. Every single one of their songs starts something like...
Right, yes.
Or 99% of them.
Which is actually the sequence that you have here, isn't it?
Yeah.
In your song.
And they all have a guy with basically the same voice, and then they have another guy with a bass voice. And the solo is basically him talking the lyrics in a really low, like a bass voice. So I thought I want to do a sort of a pastiche of that. And it came into my head, through life. And it's about, I'm trying to really do something that's quite universal. Get to a certain age and you realize we do complicate matters. And lost in all the chatter, I mean, I have a very, very profound feelings about the negative sides of technology, even though obviously it's the reason you and I are able to do this. And the moment's all that matters is, it could be a reference to, Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, kind of gone mainstream the last few years. But this idea of, the moment, we never focus on the moment. One idea that came into my head was, how many times do we breathe a day? Thousands? Does anyone remember any of their breaths from a given day?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it popped into my head because in meditation, obviously, I practice vipassana, which is insight meditation, which is breathing, as opposed to a mantra. So it's lovely to just get those lines in. You think, I want to say this to the world, and it's in my song. Yes.
All right. Well, that connects with me because, years and years ago, when I was a teenager, I read something about what were called here and now experiments, where you just concentrate on the here and now, and as it were, tell yourself in the starkest way, you are alive at this moment, and your consciousness is experiencing things to bring you into this moment. And then years and years later, when I was reading Francis Schaeffer, the Christian theologian, he was talking about practicing the presence of God. And I immediately saw a connection between those two things. So not just to say I am here, but also I'm in the presence of God at this moment. The two things have stayed with me ever since, really. So I've always found that really helpful. So, a lot of people talk in terms of having some sort of wow experience in a spiritual sense, which I'm not against. But of course, you don't always get wow experiences. But what you can do pretty much always is just arrest yourself and say, in this moment, I am in the presence of God. And that just changes your consciousness, calms you down, makes you realize who you are, where you are in the cosmos, sort of thing. And I've always found that really helpful. So I do kind of connect with the sort of thing you mean there, yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that if you actually identify it as a wow moment at the time, in a way you're almost judging it.
No, and I suppose what I mean is there are certain experiences, a spiritual experience that you can have. And obviously, I'm speaking here from my own Christian experience, where something happens to you. You find yourself in a situation, I don't know, it could be a worship situation, it could be some special place or meeting some particular person, and then something happens to you. You think, well, where did that come from? This is really weird. This is an other experience. In my view, this is an experience of God. But those are pretty rare. Whereas, everyday life, I'm thinking, well, where is God? But if I just do that business of it, just a moment, calm down, I'm here, and I know, just as an act of the will, I'm saying I know that I am in the presence of God, then to some extent, although it's not such a wow experience, it has some of the same effects upon me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. would that be anything to do with sportsmen talk about being in the zone when you're just, or does it have to be a revelation, or could it just be very, very, very in the moment when you transcend the sort of scattered mind state that we generally live in?
I reckon it's probably connected to that, yeah.
Yeah. I would call it transcending the scattered mind.
Through life, we complicate matters. Through life, our hopes and dreams get shattered. True lies, they happen all over the world. Stifle each other through life, from one unto the other. True lies, they happen all over the world. What is this thing? This thing called love. It makes the world go round. But when it comes on strong, and nothing is ever the same. Through life, we're lost in all the chatter. Through life, the moment's all that matters. True love, it happens all over the world. It happens all over the world. This thing called love, it makes the world go round. But when it comes so strong, and nothing is ever the same. Through life, we complicate matters. Through life, our hopes and dreams get shattered. But true love, it happens all over the world. It happens all over the world. It happens all over the world.
Okay, well, hopefully we've listened to Through Life there. There's another one that I would like to play, with your permission, which I don't know how profound it is. Maybe it is. But I think it's just a really good song.
Yeah.
A good popular, at least it should be popular, I think, popular style love song. The Good People Know. I really like it. I met a girl at the ice cream stand.
Oh, yeah.
And just goes on about falling in love, and then the characters marry, is that right? And have a perfect marriage kind of thing?
Yeah, for a while, yeah.
For a while. And then, and then it says something like, but everybody knows about me, and I wonder what that was all about.
A few things to say. Okay. I discovered a podcast called Soda Jerker, and I recommend it to any songwriters. It's two guys from Liverpool who actually went to Paul McCartney's LIPA, Liverpool Institute for the Performing Arts. Mm-hmm. And very interesting. As I've got older, I've started to have more respect for the sort of crafted songs. Have you ever heard of the Brill Building?
No.
The Brill Building is basically a place. It's almost like a factory of songwriting. I don't know if it still exists, actually.
Is this Brill as in Brill Cream?
No, I think it's Brill.
Okay,
yeah.
All right.
Probably in those days they probably put Brill Cream in their hair, but that's another story.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
No, the Brill Building, it's kind of factory songwriting. So I think people would literally do a working day with pianos and guitars around and produce songs for people who don't write their own, like could be Frank Sinatra. I mean, I think in those days everyone's trying to get Sinatra to do their songs. And when I was younger, I kind of scoffed at that kind of thing, the sort of quote-unquote crafted, like Burt Bacharach or something. And I'd say, no, it's got to be all inspirational. It's got to be all personal. But Soda Jerker, they interviewed a couple of people, Neil Sedaka being one of them. And I kind of thought, I need to broaden my palette a bit more and accept that. So I thought, well, I'll write a song. I just got in my head, the good people know. Everybody knows that the good people know, and the good people know about me, which honestly, Julian, doesn't mean anything.
Right, okay, you disappointed me.
No, sorry, right. I couldn't tell you what that means. But I thought, I want to write a cheesy pop song. Mm. So I just came up with it. I met a girl at the ice cream stand. She was tall with a cup in her hand. I suppose I had, again, Nina, my ex-girlfriend, in my mind. But it's very non-specific.
Did you consciously mould it around the Kinks? It sounds very Kinks to me.
Not consciously, no. But I mean, Ray Davies is, again, I would call him a songwriting genius. I love the 60s output of the Kinks.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that sound in your music, I would say.
Would you say that? Yeah. It's not conscious,
I think so.
It's bound to come out, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I had this idea, met a girl, married her. I like this stuff about she carried my life in her hands and then I carried her life in my hands. It's this idea of codependence.
Yeah.
In my relationship, and I guess in a lot of relationships, you bear all your vulnerabilities. And so you're looking after each other, basically. And there are times when the other person's strong and you're feeling vulnerable and weak. And then there are other times when you're the strong one. You kind of fill each other's gaps. Mm. But just some lines. This is very Kinky. Sorry.
Go on.
We fell in love despite the weather, which, I don't know, it has connotations of, England, despite the rain or whatever. But it doesn't mean anything consciously. I just like it.
I just wondered if you chose it to rhyme with together, to be honest.
Oh, probably, yeah.
There's one line that I really like, is that when it's perhaps the hook of the song is, come with me and I'll keep you warm at night. Yeah. I don't know the exact melody, but you have a sort of sliding, I'll keep you warm at night, and you change the harmony at that point. It reminds me of something, but I can't place it. Can you think what that might be?
I'm just gonna come clean here. I don't care.
Go on.
There's a couple of songs. I was listening to a song called Mr. Moonlight. Beatles covered it, but I think it was originally called Dr. Feelgood. And it's, and we love you, Mr. Moonlight. And there's a couple of chords. Well, we love you, Mr. Moonlight. Come with me and I'll keep you warm at night. So just...
Ooh! Yes.
Oh, no, naughty me.
That is actually a quote, is it, that you put in the song, effectively?
Oh, no, the lyrics aren't the same. No.
Oh,
okay. It's the chord change, yeah.
Chord sequence, right, okay.
A girl at the ice cream stand. She was tall with a cup in her hand. I know that she saw me 'cause she looked up to see that I was holding a candle for her. We fell in love despite the weather. I thought that we could spend our lives together, but everybody knows what the good people know, and the good people know about me. Married the girl from the ice cream stand. Had she carried my life in her hands. Now everybody knows that the good people know, and the good people know about me. But life with you, it never grows old. Love with you, it never grows cold. Come with me and I'll keep you warm at night, and everything will be alright. I met a girl and she made me smile. She sidled up and said, let's stay a while. I knew that she knew me, cause she looked up to see that I was holding her life in my hands. Life with you, it never grows old. And love with you, it never grows cold. Come with me and I'll keep you warm at night, and everything will be alright. We fell in love despite the weather. I knew that we would spend our lives together. But everybody knows that the good people know, and the good people know about me. Yes, everybody knows that the good people know, and the good people know, and the good people know about me.
Yeah, because I'm also a big, through Bob Dylan, who's another right up there with my musical heroes, I got very interested in folk music for a while. And the folk sort of ethos, before we got all obsessed with intellectual property and everything else, is that melodies are kind of up for grabs. I think what gets frowned upon is if you start nicking people's lines and lyrics. So I kind of go by that basis. I'd never nick anyone's lines, but, you know, a couple of chords here and there. Noel Gallagher said, I basically spent 20 years rewriting my record collection and hoping nobody notices. But to answer your question, yeah, is little chord changes stick in my mind, because I used to be basically a covers act when I lived in Asia. So,
well, I'm going to let you off this.
There'll be plenty more.
I mean, I remember, it's not in the same scene whatsoever, but I wrote with a friend a comic opera in style of Gilbert and Sullivan when I was quite young, actually. And one of the songs, I ripped off the chord sequence of the Mikado's song from the Mikado. I just thought, I know this is going to work. I had a completely different melody over the top, but it just worked because it was such a strong chord sequence. So, yeah, I've done exactly the same sort of thing there. Perhaps even worse, because it was exactly the same chord sequence right the way through the song.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's come with YouTube, this issue of plagiarism has come up more and more. And sorry, Led Zeppelin fans, if you don't know this, but Led Zeppelin's first album, I mean, at least half of the songs almost sound exactly the same. I mean, do you know the song Dazed and Confused by any chance?
Remind me.
I mean, the Zeppelin one's been dazed and confused for so long, it's not true, and it's a hard rock song. And then the year earlier, a guy called Jake Holmes came out with a song called Dazed and Confused, which goes, been dazed and confused. I mean, it's exactly the same. And there's The Last Time by the Rolling Stones. This could be the last time, maybe the last time, I don't know. Staple Singers, fantastic gospel group.
Oh, yes.
They had a song, This Could Be the Last Time, which is fair enough. And then it goes, maybe the last time, I don't know. So exactly the same. So
do you, this is one of my silly anecdotes, do you remember the Magic Roundabout?
Yeah.
And the theme music to that?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that that chord sequence matches the basic harmonic structure of one of Bruckner's symphonies. And so Bruckner must have copied the Magic Roundabout, but there we are.
One of Noel Gallagher, two of Noel Gallagher's songs. One of them is called Shaker Maker, and it's basically I'd like to teach the world to sing. I'd like to teach the world. And hilariously, another song, I think it's She's Electric, Yeah, the middle bit goes, I'll be you and you'll be me. There's lots and lots for us to see. And do you remember a program called You and Me?
Yeah, children's program.
I watched it as a kid in the 80s, and it's you and me and you.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. I mean, not exactly the same.
No. And then there's John Williams' ultra-famous Star Wars theme that's extremely close to Eric Korngold's music to the film King's Row earlier in the century.
Wow, right. That's what I mean. We could go on. We could go on forever. If you investigated this thing, you'd suddenly find all my heroes have been nicking stuff left, right, and centre. So
yeah, it is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, another one that I'd like to talk about and play, if possible, is your song number 9, which is Lessons of War.
Yeah,
which I guess is, I suppose, your most truthy one in this collection. And let me just explain what I mean by truthy there. I'm talking about, and we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, the truth movement kind of collection of themes, and we've both expressed our reservations about that term, but what else do you call it? So we're not talking about truth necessarily as a philosophical concept or as an absolute, a search for the meaning of life, although all these things are related, etc. But
it's an absolute,
we're specifically talking about that kind of truth movement scene. So here, this will connect to the anti-war movement, I suppose, anti-war sensibility. Now, you sent me the original version of this, your acoustic version of this when you were beginning to plan it, and if I had anything to say about it. And I remember saying at the time, I thought, well, this sounds a bit repetitive, Antony. Can't you do something more with this? And you were insisting, well, this is just the basic idea. I'm going to do all kinds of manipulations to this. And so I thought, all right, okay, fair enough. I'll wait to hear. And actually, I think it does work extremely well in the end. And I can understand now why the repetitive nature of it is part of the point. It's kind of machine-like. And I guess maybe I'm misreading it, but is that what you're trying to say there? That there's something machine-like about war?
I'm very glad you picked up on that, Julian, actually, yes. So much to say about this song. It's probably the biggest production number I've ever done, really. I planned out each verse. If you notice, if anyone listens to the whole song, there's different effects. The voice is different on nearly every verse. The reason it's called Lessons of War, there's a line about, it's a silly line really, teacher smiles and drops another bomb for us all. Obviously, it's not to be taken literally that the teacher is dropping the bombs. But I suppose, in a way, it's the idea that we're all supporting war by paying our taxes, and we sort of perhaps do that unquestioningly.
Is that coming from this? I mean, last time, we were talking about music. What do we call it? Blue Suede Truths or something? We talked about Pete Seeger's song. What did you learn in school today?
What did you learn in school?
Is that what you're thinking of there?
That was an unconscious thing. I wasn't thinking of that song in particular, but I'm sure, it plays into it. Really, I mean, war has just been a preoccupation with me, even since I was a child, purely because I've been trying to discover why everybody seems to think it's so normal and it's automatically assumed to be necessary. And it's very interesting you said about the machine thing, because we made a conscious effort. I said to Kester Jones, my producer, try and find some computer noises. And very interestingly, the sound effects, which we spent a good 2 or 3 hours putting together, some of them are bombs and missiles and helicopters, but other ones are like computers. And I think one of them is something like a photocopier or something. Because you're absolutely right. It's a military-industrial complex. It's the war machine you and I have talked about many, many times.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it was actually the melody itself repeating over and over again. I thought, what just came to my mind, in many ways it's nothing like it, but Iggy Pop's The Passenger.
Oh, yeah.
Just that going over and over and over and round and round and round. And I just thought, this is just like a machine. And you've got loads of effects in there. And you start off with church chimes and bird song at the same time.
Yeah.
And I just wondered are you linking somehow the state and religion there? Is that what it's about? The sort of capturing of the religious sensibilities for the purposes of the state,
I mean, that sounds very impressive.
Civil religion.
I should just agree with you there, shouldn't I? No, when we were putting the sound effects together, Kester had a file of 100 sound effects, and we dragged about 20 of them, and we made a kind of a short list. And the birds tweeting actually came with the sound effect that was called bells, so we didn't... we just played it, and there's something about a bell that does sound very ominous.
Yeah.
What really happens, rather than me having a specific idea, what I say to Kester often, he's very much on board with this, try stuff, and then sometimes the meanings come to you as you hear it. You think, well, this is appropriate for this song, and then the meaning comes to you. And there's a film called The Wall, which is with Bob Geldof, and it's based on the Pink Floyd album. And there's this incredible moment where you see it's based on Roger Waters' father, who was killed in the Second World War. You see he's in a trench and it's being bombed. And at the exact moment that he dies, they cut to his wife, who's sitting in the garden in suburbia with the birds tweeting. So, I don't know how conscious it was to use that, but I thought that was a nice, happy accident.
Yeah.
But now the bells, I guess, to answer your question, it's sort of an ominous thing, I think.
Yeah, well, as you say, these ideas come as you're involved in the creative process. And of course, as you're listening to it, you're doing something of that yourself, aren't you? You're investing. I mean, there are associations which are intended, but you invest more than what was intended. And so when I was listening to it, I heard the bell. I immediately pictured, especially with the bird song, I pictured a graveyard.
Right.
Classically, that will be by a church. And of course, then I thought, of course, having talked about civil religion with Martin Erdmann and mentioned it a lot on the show, I thought, of course, that's right, isn't it? Part of what the state does is to capture the religion of the country to some extent and use that and say, you're going to go to war for us because really you're serving God, a manipulation of the situation.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's right. And what happens to those bodies at the end? They end up in the graveyard with the birds singing. Now all that just came in a flash, and I thought maybe that's part of what you were saying, but it's certainly consistent with what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's lovely that it meant that to you, because, a bit of an old cliche, but, the meaning of something isn't limited to what the artist thinks the meaning of it is.
Yeah, precisely.
And I'm over the moon that that meant something to you for that reason, even if it wasn't my intended meaning. I mean, Kester and I are both pretty experienced. We've been playing music for 30 years or so, and I've been songwriting for a long time. And your instincts get better and better, I think. It's like anything, just with practice,
And who was the guitarist on this?
Kester Jones.
Excellent guitarist.
He's a producer now. He's produced all my albums, and he's a multi-instrumentalist. He's a songwriter himself, singer, guitarist, pianist, harmonica player. Maybe genius is overstating it, just because some would say there's only been 4 geniuses in history, but he's just got so many qualities. And the more you work with him, you realize it's not just technical. I mean, I call him White Jimmy, referring to Jimi Hendrix.
That's great.
For his guitar style. But
all right. So what did you do with this guitar solo? I mean, there's towards the end anyway, there's this big climax that builds up, and then it ends with this fades out and you can hear the end of a bomb blast. But this big climax that builds up and the guitar is a big feature of that. Did you write that? Did he improvise that or what?
Well, the original idea was Jimi Hendrix's recording of the Star Spangled Banner. Oh, yeah. Have you heard that from Woodstock?
Yeah.
That was incredible because it was something like 4 or 5 in the morning on the last day of Woodstock. Hendrix played the Star Spangled Banner, which is obviously the anthem of the USA, in an incredible way. And he used his guitar to give the sounds of like machine guns. It was sort of these howling sounds. And it's a collaboration, and it's been an incredible production because rather than sort of be able to book a studio, we're both English teachers, and we've been meeting. We can do a couple of hours here, then I've got to run off and teach a class, and then he's got to teach a class in the afternoon. It's been an incredible way to do it. And the last month of the album was stifling heat in Madrid. And of course, because we record basically in his bedroom, we call it Alcalá Studios because it's on a road called Calle Alcalá in Madrid. And we have to have all the windows closed and the fan off to record vocals and things. So it was in the stifling heat, and it's all been incredibly uncomfortable, but it added to the whole experience somehow.
Well, let's hear it then.
Catalysts have come inside and left us for dead. We're trying to make some sense of all the things that they said. Stay inside if safety is but all you desire. Me, I need to be alone in the line of fire. His lesson and just smiles and drops another bomb for us all. Why are they still coming in and killing our friends? On the floor and duck your head, this night will never end. And I wanna kill, but I don't wanna take. And I wanna kill, but not for killing's sake. And I wanna be protected away from all the things that they'll say. And I wanna kill, but I don't wanna take. And I wanna kill, but not for killing's sake. And I wanna be protected away from all the things that they'll say. Gone, I'm cold and never felt so alone. I'm thinking of the past and all the people I've known. I know it's wrong, but who can draw a line in the sand? Not those who even dare to cross the man in command. Now lay them all down. Your enemy is lying in the frozen ground. You don't know his name and there's no way he knows yours. And nobody remembers what the killing is for.
This year, I've been on a kind of orgy of learning. I mean, I always am really. I'm a podcast addict, including my renewed.
And you got to say that, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's genuine. And you and I have been talking for a while, haven't we, about maybe doing a review of Hearts and Minds and tackling the subject of war, and hopefully we'll get there in the future. But sort of in preparation for that, and in conjunction with producing this song, I read Schindler's Ark for the first time. I'd never read the book, and I rewatched the film for the first time since I saw it at the cinema in 94 or 95. And that was an incredibly emotional experience, reading the book and then watching the film. And then I listened to a couple of audiobooks, one called What It Is Like to Go to War, and another one called Kill Anything That Moves, which was absolutely harrowing because it was a guy who found secret files about Vietnam, America's involvement. And it basically describes about 100 My Lai massacres. You know, we're told that the My Lai massacre was some kind of one-off, and it's always spun like that. Yeah. Unless this guy has just invented hundreds and hundreds of details and is lying, which I don't think. It's a journalist. He's put this together.
Yeah, kind of wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, and a book I read a few years ago called Jarhead, which is it was a memoir. Ah. And the chorus that you just heard there, I want to kill, but I don't want to take. I want to kill, but not for killing's sake. That is the human instinct to kill, which comes out through training. I want to kill, but I don't want to take, and I don't want to kill for killing's sake. So I want to kill, but I don't want to kill. It's that dichotomy. And I want to be protected away from all the things that they'll say is all about how people, again, in Vietnam, when the vets came back, the public, rather than turning on the people that created the war, they took the easy route and turned on the veterans themselves and called them baby killers. And so that lyric was very conscious. That's the soldier talking. I've got this thing I want to kill because it's in me, and I've been trained for over 13 weeks to be a killer. But actually, I don't want to kill. Please don't blame me for it. And then the very quiet verse you heard, my friends have gone, I'm cold and never felt so alone. That's supposed to be a guy in a trench reflecting on it. One of the sounds you heard, a keyboard, was actually a mellotron. And that was supposed to be some sort of triumphant, they won the battle. So basically, to summarize, I was pleased with that song because that was a very deliberate production and it had a structure, which a lot of mine don't.
Yeah, it worked really well.
Yeah, pleased with that.
I've been trying to think of a segue for this one, and I can't. I suppose it links to something we said previously about lyrics and how they can mean different things to different people. And I was thinking of R.E.M. You look at some of their lyrics, you think, what the heck is this about? But they're so evocative. And here's the link. I thought there was something of a kind of R.E.M. style to the beginning of From My Heart. Oh, yeah. Michael Stipe in a sort of tender moment, I like this very much. That sort of oscillating, always sort of seesawing between one chord and then another and going back and forth from 1 to 4, or 1 to 4, or 1 to 4, like that, with a very simple melody. Yeah. Very intimate, sort of gentle dissonance with those two chords there.
Yeah.
You came in my life, you changed my horizons, and presumably this is another love song.
Yeah, about Nina again.
Is it really? Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's the female voice towards the end? You have a duet there.
Yeah, it's a lady called Melanie Lawrence, who's actually Kester's girlfriend. And she played the viola on that song, and she did the harmony and did a lovely job. Nina gets quite teary whenever she hears that. Now we've broken up, and I get quite teary when I hear it, which is quite weird when you get emotional about something you've written yourself. But it's capoed on the 8th fret, where you get this very nice. Do you know what a capo is? I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who doesn't, it's a thing that you put on the guitar, and it makes everything higher, so everything higher notes. So it's sort of.
There you go.
And it's just a D shape on the 8th fret, and then I just take it off and I get an open note. And then
you get that nice dissonance there on the second chord.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really nice. And at the end of the song, you combine both chords, which I think is really nice.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Well,
Lovely
you're
ending.
Explaining a lot of the stuff I did without me realizing. Yeah.
I love that combination at the end. It's just, and it's left there. Then you resolve it in your mind, because obviously it's a dissonance, which is consistent with what's happened in the song, but you're left with this dissonance at the end, and it just decays away. And of course, in your mind, you resolve it onto chord 1 of the piece, which you just do automatically inside your head. And I just love the way that works. It's really good.
Yeah, thanks. I was pleased with that. Well, I may as well get personal. I think Nina and I hadn't been in relationships for a while when we met. So it was, you came in my life, I let you in my world. It's like when you haven't been with someone for ages, it's hard to let someone back in, particularly when you're in your 30s or your 40s or something. You get more stuck in your ways, perhaps. I mean, that was written very consciously about her. And it's left hanging at the end. It goes, I just want to say. And as I was saying to you earlier, number 8, Ballad in G, which is 3 songs later, and we made sure that we separated them. That actually answers it.
Uh-huh.
And what I want to say is, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You came in my life. I let you in my world. You changed my horizons. Took me in when the pressure was rising. Now I want to say thank you, my love. Thank you from my heart. I've seen your heart, and I've seen all sides of you. Looked into your eyes, and I've seen for miles and miles and miles. Brought me back to life. Showed me my softer side. I know your pain, and I know the struggles within. Look deep in your eyes, and I've seen for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. You came in my life. I let you in my world. You changed my horizons. Took me in when the pressure was rising, and I just want to say
And I consciously used a few of the same lyrics. So, you came in my life, and then it's you came in my life. which is a classic country riff. So I actually answered I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for the experience, even if it didn't work out in the end.
Lovely song. I enjoyed it.
Wow, this is very personal. It's like therapy, this, Julian. It's great. Should be paying you for that.
Go on. Well, the last one I want to talk about is the end of the album and follows Lessons of War. Because I think it would have been wrong to end on Lessons of War because it's such a downer. So you're left with this explosion, and then you've got to have something else, and you do have something else. You have this last song called "Rows of Empty Chairs," which of course everybody is thinking is spelled ROWS, which isn't though. It's ROSE. So okay, I'm going to ask you in a minute what on earth is that about. But what I really love about this is, you mentioned folky style some point in the conversation, and here I just thought Bert Jansch, with acoustic guitar, and it's a very modal, folky sort of sound, and I was expecting to hear Bert Jansch. So, is that a conscious influence there?
What it actually is, it's called Travis picking, and there was a fella called Merle Travis. He actually featured, I don't know if you've ever seen the film From Here to Eternity. It's got Frank Sinatra, Macaulay Culkin.
Right.
Frank, it's got
extremely young.
Start that again. Yes. It's got Frank Sinatra, Montgomery Clift.
Oh, right, yeah.
Sorry.
Wow.
And Burt Lancaster, among other people. And he features in it. And anyway, when the Beatles went to India in 1968, Donovan, who I'm sure you've heard of, Mellow Yellow, lots of other classics, he taught John Lennon this thing called Travis picking, and just to give you one song that John Lennon uses called Julia. Can you hear that? Yeah. It's got that sort of alternating bass, dum dum dum. So it's a very sort of self-contained. It sounds very good on one guitar. It's almost like you've got a bass going.
Yes.
And so I basically took a bit of that, and I had this riff. I've had this riff in my head for about 10 years, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I've always wanted to do a song with this Travis picking. Do you want me to talk about the whole song, or is there any bit?
You can do, but you're just playing it there. Again, it's just come straight back into my mind. Obviously, Bert Jansch and people of that ilk are doing that kind of thing, aren't they? Yeah. And that's a very melancholic, modal, almost meditative sound that's going on there.
Yeah.
Did you consciously pick a particular mode? Because, I would say that you're playing there with the Dorian mode.
Again, that sounds very impressive, and I'll take that. I'll take that, Julian. Thank you.
I think actually it's probably a mixture of two modes. I think you're oscillating from the Mixolydian mode to the Dorian and back and forth. But
I think I'm definitely oscillating between the Mixolydian and the Dorian.
So you didn't do that?
No,
you didn't?
No, joking aside, it's just this Travis picking thing, and I had this riff for ages and ages. And this was interesting. This seems to be most people's favourite song, actually. It was actually a product of hard graft. We were getting towards the end. We had sort of emergency sessions starting on the 1st of July, actually. And we needed one more song. And I'd already worked out that this was going to be called Rows, R-O-S-E, of Empty Chairs. And I had this cool name, and I thought, this is great. And I couldn't finish the song, and I tried it about 5 different ways. And I was working on it every evening after work, and I was thinking, we're nearly finished. And I just bit the bullet about 3 days before the end of the sessions. I thought, okay, make a demo, just go with this. Sent it to my usual sounding boards, which is 2 or 3 people who tell me honestly if things are good or not. And then we did it. The next day we demoed it with Kester, and then the next day after that, another friend, Simon Hughes, came in and did cajon. Do you know what cajon is?
I don't know.
It was originally used in flamenco. It's basically a box, and it's got a snare sound and a bass sound.
Oh.
You sit on it, it's a box, and you hit it, and it's got snare sound and a bass sound.
I think I've seen it, but I've never known what it's called.
Yeah. Well, like I said, originally flamenco, but a lot of sort of rock bands use it. I suppose it's become trendy, but it's genuinely a pretty good instrument, I think. And the lyrics, the chorus goes, hidden forces everywhere and being alive is just not fair. Rows and rows of empty chairs, don't know if I still really care. This is quite amusing because the band we had, the Backfield Plan, in Madrid, there's a weird thing that goes on. When you play at venues, you have to more or less find the audience yourself. There don't seem to be any regulars that go to the venues, especially for your concert, because no one's heard of us. So you have to kind of almost beg your friends to come to your concerts, and then you go to their concerts, and it's ridiculous. And because I wanted to play a lot this year, because I was pretty sure I was leaving, towards the end, our concerts were attended by about 6 people. Oh, yeah.
That's so unjust, because it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm telling people out there, it really is. Go and listen to it. And as I'll probably say at the end as well, do buy a copy as well, because I think you all deserve to be encouraged too.
Yeah, I mean, we were a good band. I'm probably going to keep the name. Kes just thinks I should call it the Backfield Naan if I moved to India. I was impressed by that one. We do like our puns, all of us.
Yeah, don't though.
No. Anyway, but the idea of hidden forces everywhere, this is very true for me as well. The fact that there's all these, life is controlled without you really realizing it. And that's what, you were talking about truth movement. I think alternative media is a good blanket term, I guess.
Sure, okay.
Being alive is just not fair. It doesn't mean, I'm suicidal or anything. It's just being alive is just not fair because there's all these rules and there's all these things in life working against you.
Okay, then who's Rose then?
Nobody in particular. It just came in mind of like a fallen queen or something. But there's two things happening at the same time.
But you use her as a kind of mythical character to represent something, don't you? Because you say she's vacant, she's just a figment. Not a catch to anyone but you. So what does she represent?
I don't know. Maybe someone. I don't know. I think.
Did you write this song?
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah. I think I went into another space. I had this idea of a fallen queen. It only came out because I thought Rose, ROWS, of Empty Chairs was a bit of a naff title. So I do like my puns, as I said, and it worked because the lyrics say, my puns have ceased to rhyme. My puns have lost their rhyme. So just flashed in my mind, use a pun as the title.
So you say that she has some kind of mythical function. So what does she represent?
Maybe some kind of elusive figure. I've always liked the idea of guys singing about sort of mythical women in songs without defining them.
Right.
Some ideal that you're attracted to, but you can never quite get there. It's that elusive. I mean, I think I had in my mind there's various figures. There's a singer called Nico who you may or may not have heard of, but she worked with the Velvet Underground. And she was this... they did a song called Femme Fatale, which she sang. I think it's a Femme Fatale figure.
Okay.
It's someone that you wish you could get to, but you can't because they're always kind of out of reach. But it is quite vague. But I think really my motive was to avoid calling the song Rose, ROWS, of Empty Chairs. It's just a neat pun, really. But
it is, and it looks very profound. So you've achieved that. It's a lovely song. I like the song. I really, really like the song, and I think it's an excellent way of ending the album. Yeah, it brings everything down to a calmer mood after the previous one, and rounds things off nicely. And it's quite different, I think, to quite a lot of the other things in the album. It's nice.
She's all alone, no one in her sphere. She's sitting on her throne, queen of nothing, rose by another name, nothing to gain. I call the meek and the mild all together, misfits together, doing the push and the pull, egos to spare. I know it's hard, but you've got to let it go. She's vacant, just a figment, not a catch to anyone but you. Hidden forces everywhere, and being alive is just not fair. Rows and rows of empty chairs, don't know if I still really care. Hidden forces everywhere, and being alive is just not fair. Rows and rows of empty chairs, don't know if I still really care. I call us all together to kill other, act out our walk destinies. It's just a state of mind. My puns have ceased to
Well, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed that interview, and in particular, I hope you enjoyed these songs as much as I do. I think it is a very good album indeed, so please do go over to bandcamp.com, specifically antonyrotuno.bandcamp.com, and listen to the full album. And as I said before, perhaps even buy a copy, which I would obviously recommend listeners to do if you can. It's incredibly cheap for what it is, I think, and I think it's worth every penny and more. You can indeed contribute more if you so wish, so please do consider that. It's not about making money, but it can be very encouraging to have some of your expenses covered in that way, so please do consider that. There are, of course, more songs than we heard today, and if you actually have a downloaded copy of the whole album, naturally you'll get more of a feel as to how the whole album hangs together. That was part 1 of our conversation. Part 2 will probably be coming out not next time, but the time after that, because I'm hoping in the meantime to be speaking to the Christian thinker Joel Furchess. So that will probably be the next podcast. Anyway, there's more of all this on the schedule page at The Mind Renewed. So that's themindrenewed.com/schedule. I also need, of course, to say that all the music we've heard today is copyright Antony Rotuno, and there will be further details about things that were said in the podcast and the music itself on the show notes page for today's podcast. So I think that really is all I need to say for this show. So I will just leave you with my normal words, which are, you have been listening to me, Julian Charles of themindrenewed.com, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the near future. Hello everybody, Julian Charles here of themindrenewed.com, coming to you as usual from the depths of the Lancashire countryside here in the UK, and welcome to TMR number 227, which is the continuation of the conversation I was having with Antony Rotuno a few weeks back on his latest album called Through Life, which we concentrated on last time, but the conversation also went on to talk about his previous album, Adventures in Retrospect, and that is going to be the focus of this part of the conversation today in this podcast. Now, for those of you who don't know, Antony is a long-time friend of TMR, having been on the podcast several times over the lifetime of The Mind Renewed, which is now in its 7th year of existence. When I started this, I had no notion that it was going to exist after all that time, but it does. It is here. It certainly, of course, had its ups and downs with the various uncertainties uncertainties of life getting in the way of productivity. But it is here, and it's looking like more regular podcasting is just around the corner. Anyway, Antony, as I say, has been on many times before, discussing all manners of subjects. He's a very interesting chap, a good friend, I would say. He would not, I think I'm right in saying he would not identify as a Christian believer, but he would say he's certainly a spiritual person. I would agree, he's a spiritual person. And anyway, we have a great deal in common as regards our concern about what's going on in the world. And I think many similarities in our approach to the arts and a number of things, actually. So a lot of that comes out in this conversation. Anyway, again, for those of you who are new to TMR, let me repeat that although The Mind Renewed is necessarily a reflection of my way of seeing the world, it's my production, so it's going to be that. It's not supposed to be a closed shop of just talking to people who agree with me on worldview matters. Of course, many times I will speak to such people, but very often I speak to people with whom I have fundamental disagreement. But TMR is much broader than that. It is, at least in part, about speaking to many different people from all kinds of backgrounds and finding points of commonality, points of mutual concern, so as hopefully to build bridges between us in our differences and similarities. In a world where, quite frankly, we are frequently being artificially divided. Our differences are being exaggerated for political purposes. So there we are. That is a taste of TMR. It is a Christian podcast, but it's not, hopefully, a narrowly defined kind of podcast. Anyway, I hope you get the picture, and I do, of course, if you are new to this, I encourage you to go through the archives and get a taste of quite what it is about. So, that having been said, we pick up on the conversation at the point where we left it. I do encourage you, if you haven't heard the first part, to go and listen to that first and then listen to the rest of this. So, Antony and I, having talked about Through Life and played some of the music, we then go on to talk about his previous album, which I also recommend, Adventures in Retrospect, and enjoy some of the music from that album as well. So I leave you noting that this, of course, was recorded before he went to India, and he has now since returned to the UK safe and sound, having had an amazing but quite emotionally draining experience, but safe and sound back in the UK. So here it is, the continuation of our conversation, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the very near future. Okay, I wanted to ask about Adventures in Retrospect. Just a couple of things, really. I mean, I mentioned earlier on about the truthy aspect, which I thought was a little stronger in this previous album. And I'm just looking at some of the notes here. I mean, you've got one of the songs was called New World, and then in brackets, Order. So that's in your face straight away. Oh, what's going on here? Yeah. And then with The Fool's Guide, which is another song, one of the phrases you have there is, there's a thought crime in my head. Okay, so that's Orwellian terminology there. And the end of one of the songs, you actually have you saying something like, let's tell them it was jet fuel, and you've got the audience chuckling with you, which obviously is a reference to 9/11. Actually, let me ask you about that. Did you actually do that live? I mean, was that a real audience reaction to your comment there?
No. I what I did was, it was based on a poster, which is Cheney, Bush and Rumsfeld all laughing, and they've obviously been superimposed. They're not actually all together. And in the background is the towers burning, and the caption says something like, let's tell them it was jet fuel, which is obviously the alternative media idea that it wasn't jet fuel, but it was, what's the explosive they were supposed to have used?
Nanothermite.
Oh, nanothermite.
The going hypothesis,
Yeah, so I just sort of chucked that in, and then the audience is just a sound effect from somewhere. I just put them together. I just thought it worked very well.
You threw it in just at the end of the song, and it does work well, actually. So this is New World Order. It is very truthy. And inside the lyrics you have, keep yourself free and stay with me. I'll be a leader if you want me to be. Now, what's all that about? What's that? Are you offering to be a leader of some sort, Antony?
Only a leader of maybe one person. I suppose it's in a roundabout way. It's saying, I've got stuff to teach you. I suppose I'm not offering myself as a leader of any movement, no. But I think to be perfectly honest, those lyrics again, they just came out and they just seemed to fit. And New World, the idea, I added the order. The order's actually in brackets.
It is, yeah.
So there's a nice bit. There was a lady called Julian Charles, who's another person who worked with me on a few songs. She's got a lovely voice. She's a songwriter herself. And there was this bit, a changing of their minds, a new world for our time. And that was supposed to be quite hopeful. And it was the idea that we can probably through the internet, I suppose, now we can change the world. The old 60s idea, but updated to the 21st century.
Is that what the line, there's a possibility, is referring to?
Yeah.
The possibility of changing things.
I'll say it again. There's a possibility of a changing of their minds. And again, that's the idea that you have to change the way people think. What was it we called it? Changing the discourse. Our very first conversation.
Yes.
See, it all links
That's right, it does.
Beautiful. Yeah. And then I just added order. You could almost say it was a joke, but it was a reference to that idea of New World Order.
They make you feel small, give you nothing at all. They say they're so fair, but they don't really care. Keep it neat and tidy, I'll just give it away. Make them really feel you got nothing to say, but that will lose your credibility. Make a choice what you wanna be. Do you wanna be a doctor and royalty, or be a loner on the subject of loyalty? Did he know just what he said? At the time he was really dead. Keep yourself free, stay with me. I'll be a leader if you want me to be. I'll say it again, there's a possibility of a changing of their minds. A new world in our time. Push together and we'll get it there. The means ain't always fair. Keep it neat and tidy, I'll just give it away. Make him really feel you got nothing to say, but that will lose your credibility. Just make a choice what you wanna be. Do you wanna be a doctor and royalty, or be a loner and the subject of loyalty? Keep yourself free, stay with me. I'll be a leader if you want me to be. I'll say it again, there's a possibility. Just keep yourself free and stay with me. I'll be a leader if you want me to be. I'll say it again, there's a possibility. Say it again, there's a possibility. Keep yourself free and stay with me. I'll be a leader if you want me to be. I'll say it again, there's a possibility. 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 Say it again, there's a possibility.
That's not really one of my favourite songs, that one, but musically, it's kind of it's an attempt at reggae that I don't always think works, but
I think you did.
Some people seem to like it.
Yeah, I think so. And you had a nice bossa nova moment, didn't you?
In that album,
yeah.
That was a cover, and that was Julianne singing again, Distant Dreams. Yeah, we were pleased with that one.
Yeah, it was very nice, yeah.
The drummer on that track, and in fact the drummer on I think nearly all of the songs of the last two albums, is a fellow called Ernesto Pestana from Cuba. I would say he's unlike anyone I've ever met, really. He's got the timekeeping of a Cuban, and I know that because I used to have a Cuban girlfriend many years ago. The way I met him was quite strange because I saw him on a video of one of our other bands, of a friend of ours. And the very next day I saw him at this open mic that I mentioned earlier. And then I think the day after that, I randomly saw him in the street. He was handing out leaflets or something and for one of his gigs. And I thought, well, this is serendipitous. So I invited him to come and jam with us. And we immediately got on well. And then I found out as we were chatting, he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, you've never heard of it. Don't worry." And he said, "Where?" And I said, "Oh, this is all in Spanish, by the way." And I said, "I'm from Egham in Surrey." And Egham is, I don't know if you've heard of Egham, but it's a pretty nondescript place.
I've heard of it, yeah. I've never been there.
It's sort of off the M25. It's near Windsor and quite near Staines. And he said, "Oh, I used to live there." I'm like, "What?" And it turned out, I mean, it's not actually that strange because there's quite a famous university there called Royal Holloway College.
Oh, that's right. London University was actually the same university I went to, but not that college, yeah.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of a sucker for serendipity, but Ernest was an amazing guy. I mean, he's actually a jazz drummer, and his personality and his playing are both very exuberant and very, I would say, childlike in the best possible way. The hardest thing for him was keeping a steady rock beat because it's not really his wheelhouse. But when he was able to do that, then he would add all these touches, and he loves, adding cymbal flourishes and things. And he's just added so much. I'm so pleased that I met him. And that song in particular, Bossa Nova, was much more, as I said, his wheelhouse.
So was he playing on the current album as well?
Yeah.
And so From My Heart, I noticed the sort of jazzy cross rhythm on the cymbal. That was him putting that in, was it?
Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah. You wrote it really well. Yeah.
He's brilliant, yeah. If I could mention just one more musician, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go on. Mm-hmm.
David Ernsberger, who, I don't know if you're into tennis, but this is a strange segue, but Peter Fleming used to play doubles with John McEnroe. And Peter Fleming said the best doubles combination in the world is John McEnroe and anyone. And I would probably say the best harmony duo in the world is David Ernsberger and anyone. But I'm a bit reluctant to say that in public because I don't want to insult other people who sing harmonies with him.
Right.
He and I met 4 or 5 years ago. We've been pretty close friends in Madrid. And he's got we kind of kid him that he's got a sort of angelic voice, but he can also do rock as well. And he's predominantly a country artist. He writes his own songs. And his harmonies and everything just added so much. He's a harmonica player. He did harmonica on the last album.
Ah, yeah.
So those are the core. I think, say myself, Ernesto, David, and Kester are the sort of the core musicians that I've worked with.
Excellent.
We've had a couple of people. David Bornstein, who's got his own band. He did some harmonies on the last album. And Simon, who I mentioned. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
And
didn't want to plug all my...
Yeah, do plug away, yes. However, could you say something about the song number 4 on Adventures in Retrospect? So this is another truthy kind of song. This is called The Fool's Guide, and this is the one that has this phrase, thought crime in my head. There's a lot of stuff about propaganda, media, TV, and the iPhones. You have it in for iPhones in this one. You complain about people being fools for believing what they read and what they see on the TV, and you say, I can't take it right now. So, go on, how did that one gestate?
Well, the thought came running through my head. That was a fella called James Jarman. I credit him for that. He and I were jamming a song which had a rude title, People Are, and then a word beginning with... And we were kind of joking, we were only, I think we'd had a few drinks, actually. And we were expressing a sort of frustration with people, and we took it out on them in that way. But obviously, I sanitized the lyrics.
Isn't there a danger there of elitism, saying, "Oh, people," as if you're not a person yourself?
Well, I think we talked about this before. I do have a basis on which to give my opinions about the masses, or whatever, because I did work with activists. And as I told you on a previous podcast, we used to stand on Oxford Street and we had a sign saying, "We have important questions, see us here," sort of tongue-in-cheek. But we were asking the public what they thought about things, and we were quite shocked.
Yeah.
Unless they were hiding what they really thought, we were quite shocked by people's ignorance. So it is based on experience. I'm not just...
Is this the one where you ask people, have you heard of Noam Chomsky, is it?
Yeah, that was one of the questions.
No, what?
Yeah, I changed the number every time because I can't remember, but it was something like 6 out of 50 people. I mean, it's just... but there are other ones where we ask people about things. I was shocked by how innocent people were, really, about things outside the mainstream. And you and I have talked about this, and I consider this my best song. Basically, it's a long song and it's got lots of different bits, and I think it all worked really well. But it's my statement, really. It is having a go at people and saying that they're fools. Including me. I'm a fool in many ways for believing what they read and believing what they see. And they can't take it right now. Kester said as a producer, he's sort of my sounding board as well. And he said you should repeat this, "I can't take it right now." And the opinions are like iPhones. There's a famous, I can't swear, can I?
No.
There's a famous, opinions are like, people have rear ends. Everybody's got...
Yes.
So I thought, I didn't want to obviously quote someone else's line, so I changed the opinions are like iPhones. Everybody's got one. And and there's a few things.
What's the waltz about? You suddenly go into a waltz at a certain point.
Again, that's probably a 60s thing. I can't think of any songs off the top of my head. There are 60s songs, probably Beatles songs and other people.
Mr. Kite or something.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Kite goes into a waltz. I wouldn't say that one because that's probably not one of my favourite Beatles songs, although I do like it. I can't think of a specific example, but that all came... I did a demo on the piano, I set my recorder going. I have a lovely Zoom recorder I use. I set it going and I have a songwriting session of normally 10 or 15 minutes, and stuff comes out. And then you record it and you listen back and you keep the good stuff. And so I was very pleased with that.
People are life, are your wife, and people are grunts, back to front, and people are dreams, oh, so it seems, and I can't take them right now. I can't take them right now. Can't get out of my bed. There's a thought crime running through my head. Can't take these rules, and people are fools who believe what they read and believe what they see, believe what they see on the TV. Opinions are like iPhones. Everybody's got one, and narcissists are like broken hearts. Everybody knows one. Wipe them out. Wipe them out of my mind. 'Cause I can't take them right now. I can't take them right now. Believe what you see on the TV. Don't believe them and don't believe me, I'm a tool. Line them up and school them. Give them the tools and they'll...
And there's a double meaning of the word tools.
Right.
Tool in America is a way of saying idiot, or
right.
And then of course tools of the establishment. So
yes, and you actually say I'm a tool as well.
Exactly.
Right? So you admit that there is manipulation that that you yourself, and I would include myself in this, that we are subject to, and we can't avoid it altogether.
Very important, yeah. Because this is what I say to people. I would say I'm less manipulated than the average person because I've realized that we're manipulated, and I've made a point of, trying to think freely. That previous song we were talking about, Keep Yourself Free, is to do with, keep your freedom of expression.
Absolutely. And you've described yourself as a free thinker as well, haven't you, on your blog? Have you still got that blog going?
I did two things recently. I did something about the Titanic, which is another preoccupation of mine, which is an incredible story. And I've done an audio version. Which
I haven't heard it yet, but you've got it on YouTube, I've noticed. I'll link to that as well.
I think it's actually very effective. I think my voice has really improved through I had my own podcast about John Lennon, which I started.
I was going to ask about that as well, yeah. Go on then, tell us about, because you did right at the beginning, you said, I'd missed out the fact that you're a podcaster. You are also a podcaster, and you have this podcast called Glass Onion about John Lennon, and you've interviewed some quite important people connected to the Beatles, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's called Glass Onion, on John Lennon. And I mean, I've had this knowledge in my head for, nearly 30 years, and I've finally done it. And I've started a podcast this year, and I had a lot of teething troubles with... I got a defective microphone, first of all.
Good start. Which you asked me about, and I didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, let me tell the listeners, Julian was extremely patient listening to my stupid questions. I had a bit of a nightmare at the beginning, and then I've had issues with the URL and the website, so I haven't got on iTunes yet, but I've just solved it, courtesy of my lovely niece, Olivia, who was staying with us for a few days.
The main place is SoundCloud, is it, to get it at the moment?
SoundCloud, but iTunes are now called Apple Music. When they've accepted the URL, that will link directly. So I basically put it on SoundCloud, but it links to Stitcher Radio and iTunes, and then I'm on Twitter and obviously Facebook to just put the links and everything.
Yeah.
It's been great. I mean, we were talking before, editing is the biggest nightmare just because it takes so long.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was saying it's just about worth it when you get that lovely product where there's no ers and ums and it just sounds like it's wonderfully smooth, natural, quote-unquote, conversation. Yeah.
It's worth it, yeah. It is a product, and I think it's quite important to get rid of all the coughs and the sneezes. I just can't bear that. You know, I'm going to take this earbud out. The person's just coughed really loudly. It's got to go. So I think it's just to some extent, it's a respect to the audience, isn't it?
Yeah. Final thing on the Fool's Guide, actually. So as you said earlier, I'm calling myself a tool because I don't want to say, I know everything and I'm not manipulated and you are.
Yes.
And there's a couple of other things. There's a lyric, I'm your changes of mood, I'm a drug in your food. And again, as I was saying earlier, it's lovely to get something that you want to say to the world. Just a single line. And that's talking about food is full of drugs, basically. And all the food you buy from Sainsbury's or, I don't know about American supermarkets, I don't know the names of them, but it's the same. More or less everything you buy is processed and contains chemicals.
Full of pesticides and stuff. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the idea is that food, processed food, changes your mood. Doesn't just change your weight. Everybody's obsessed with the physical side of it. I'm going to put on weight if I eat too much McDonald's, but it's also going to mess with your head as well.
I noticed that, I think it was a Horizon program, I saw a little bit of it, talking about pesticides being sprayed on fruit and vegetables and how, in the past it's tended to be said, this pesticide's okay, certain limits, safe within limits, but what's not been looked at so much is the fact that these are in combination and they've increased in their use over the decades. And so now you've got this noxious combination of large numbers of pesticides, and now concerns are being expressed to the extent that a program like Horizon on the BBC actually presents this. The stuff of conspiracy theory in a former decade? It's interesting how these things actually come to light when they get bad enough in some cases. Yeah, it's nice to buy organic vegetables and the like without being considered a nutcase now. So
yeah, I mean, this is kind of circling around to what we always talk about, isn't it? This sort of awareness. Unfortunately, I love to be positive, but I think the majority are still just passively accepting most things, but maybe I shouldn't say that, it's just my impression, but, we're heading in the right direction.
Yes, I think so. I think awareness is increasing, but of course at the same time, I think the oppression is also increasing in various ways. So yeah, it's an ongoing battle, isn't it?
But it's such a lovely thing to get these things out in songs, and I work harder and harder on my songwriting. The other song I'd maybe alert people to, because it's a favourite of mine from Adventures Retrospect, is the last song. Again, I think it's a perfect last song called Life Goes On.
Life Goes On, yeah.
Yeah, that was an exercise. Again, surprise, surprise, John Lennon influence. He did a few songs towards the end of the 1960s, specifically one called I Want You, which was about Yoko. And the only lyrics are, I want you so bad, it's driving me mad. And then it goes, she's so heavy is the chorus. And that song's 7.5 minutes and it sustains.
So it's a kind of minimalist thing. Trying to do something interesting with as little material as possible.
Exactly. And I had one on my first album called Take Me, which is also a favorite. And then I had Life Goes On. Yeah. And there's a lady called Maria Martin, who's a Spanish, she's a multi-instrumentalist, but I think she's predominantly a violinist. And she just came to Kester's house. And she'd heard the song, and I gave her extremely vague instructions, and she came up with this magical violin part, absolutely gorgeous, in about half an hour or 45 minutes. But it was nice to have that exercise in minimalism, because in a funny way, I almost think minimalism is the future. I don't know if that makes sense, but
is it? I thought it was very much the 60s.
It's impressive, to write a good song.
You're still in the 60s, Antony. That's the problem.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, you see, well, Paul McCartney said the 60s hasn't happened yet, which I have no idea what that means. But no, I think it's this idea of have you ever read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, or have you heard of it? I
have neither read it nor heard of it, no.
Oh, okay, well, I mean, have you heard of Catch-22?
Yes.
Yeah, it's sort of in the same vein, because it skips around. I think Slaughterhouse-Five came out afterwards. He was talking about, because it chops from past, present, future, it chops around just like Catch-22. He was saying that it's possible to exist in every time period. The idea being that you don't have to consider the past as the past and the future. If you try and think of it as you're existing in all those time things at the same time, it sort of, I don't know, has a kind of a liberating thing.
Not sure I can make sense of that.
No, I explained that really badly. I mean, Sorthouse 5 is not supposed, again, to be literally. Some of it is nonsensical. I suppose the idea is like not being locked, not having the past, present, and future locked into those time periods. You can exist in all of them. I know, it's very abstract.
But you can't, can you?
Right.
I mean, I immediately think theologically, classically, there's the idea that God is outside time, so God sees all time as present to God.
Yes.
But that's not me. That's God. I mean, even if that is true, you know what I mean? I mean, others would say, for example, William Lane Craig would say that God actually is directly related to time. So the future and the past are the future and the past for God like they are for us.
Right.
So I mean, that's just one particular theological view that God is outside time. But again, that would be God, not me. I'm in time. I'm here.
I see.
The past is past to me. The future's future to me, so I don't quite know what that would mean.
Yeah. It just, some things just resonate with you and you can't always quite explain them. But
No, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when I meditate, sometimes random things come from the past that I haven't thought about for 20 years because I've cleared the space for them.
Okay, but they're things of the past. They're not the present. I mean, you just said they're from the past. So
No, I understand. All I was going to say was that they come into my mind, but when you're meditating or when I go into fairly deep meditation, I'm very present. So I suppose that memory, when you meditate quite deeply, it can seem very present. It doesn't seem like a distant memory. I know that's a terrible explanation. I mean, that's just how I experience.
No, that makes sense of it. It seems as if it's in the present when it is in fact something from the past. That's coherent.
I suppose in Sorthouse 5 he's saying, I don't know, to try and live in an all-encompassing way somehow. Yeah, a little bit vague, but when I read it just resonated with me and,
Well, because this was the song Life Goes On, and you mentioned was it John Lennon influence there?
Not the sound of it, but the idea of using hardly any lyrics.
Indeed, yes. And what came to my mind was David Bowie.
Oh, right.
Funnily enough, not really the sound of it, but what was going on, and that you had this phrase that was repeating, and you just sort of stopped it and then repeated it. And it reminded me of The Prettiest Star,
that's interesting.
where he has a melody and it just stops, and there's a gap, and then it happens again, and it stops, and there's a gap, and it happens again. And I just thought that's, in a sense, that's a kind of minimalism as well. Yeah. The song, which when I first heard it, I thought, this is rubbish, but actually it's really stuck in my mind, and now I love it,
Because he used to use the cut-up method as well, didn't he? I think that came from William Burroughs, of just taking, I don't know if it was newspapers or something, cutting them out and then putting them together randomly and making lyrics out of it. Right. But I'm not the world's I'm not a massive Bowie fan. I definitely admire him.
No.
Yeah.
I just wondered if that was there. Yeah, okay.
I think The Life Goes On was what we often do again, and Kester's into this idea, is gradually layering vocals, so you've got loads of people singing the same thing. And I like that. Again, you could reference perhaps Hey Jude, na, 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 just the repetitive, so it becomes almost like a mantra. And I think there's no better mantra than life goes on, dear, please be strong, dear, For me, I find that inspirational anyway.
I've been getting into the music of, I think I mentioned before, Morton Feldman in recent couple of years or so, and he isn't normally considered to be a minimalist. Well, he's not with us anymore, but a minimalist composer. But I mean, he is really. A lot of his material is. He seems to have very few basic ideas that he then works on over and over and over again, just varying them from one statement to the next, and becomes almost trance-like. Listening to this is really meditative experience.
That's the word. Sorry, that's the word I was thinking.
Yeah, it can be. That's right. And I've really come to love that, actually. Some of his pieces in particular. And of course, they go on, some of them, for hours. I mean, his second string quartet that I've got into recently goes on for 5 hours. And it literally is 4 or 5 blocks of contrasting gestures on the string quartet instruments. And he literally has a statement that then gets repeated, and then gets repeated, and it stops. Then it goes to the next block, and he has a statement, and it's repeated and repeated with slight variations, and it stops. And it goes on and on and on like this. And you realize these things are gradually changing. It's all related to the material he started with. And then sometimes you'll find that a block comes back, which is very much like something you heard earlier.
Yeah.
But I find it's a weird experience listening to it, because it feels like it's always the same but always different. It's a weird... a weird sort of contradiction,
It's a challenge as well, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
It's a challenge as well to listen to.
I don't think I've listened to that one all the way through, actually. What I tend to do is to stick my earbud in and go to sleep. Listen to half an hour and I'm asleep, and then I try to listen to a different section of it.
Well, I think an idea I've been trying to develop is, it's just a very simple idea. There aren't really any rules. And actually, Yoko Ono is hugely maligned, but I actually like some of her stuff. And I read a book called The Beatles and the Avant-Garde. Avant-garde is supposed to be sort of progressive or experimental. Yeah. And there was a whole section about her. And after I read it, I had this wonderfully liberating feeling. I think you can do anything.
Absolutely. And that's one of Morton Feldman's big things. There are, in a sense, aren't any rules. He was very much complaining about students, because he was a teacher at Buffalo in the United States. And he was complaining about them, saying that, they come to university and they want to write a good piece. And he said, that's the problem. They want to write a good piece. In other words, they are trying to find out what are the acceptable rules for doing something. And this is almost a quote from him. He said that when he composed, he asked the question, well, not what should I do next? What shouldn't I do next?
Yeah.
What's the wrong thing to do? But, not just complete rubbish, but, what's the unacceptable thing to do? Now, let's make that work. You know what I mean? Let's make that a musical experience. And I think, what an interesting way of thinking about creativity. What's the wrong thing to do?
Oh, when we did the Truth comedy, you were talking about Andy Kaufman, remember?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
And he was giving a bad comedy performance, but it worked.
Yes, that's right, yes.
So what's good and what's bad?
Absolutely. Yeah, you change the context, don't you? That's right.
I think I just trust my instincts more now, just through experience. And I don't, honestly, Julian, almost like I don't really care. I'm not making money from my music. I put it online. I have a fair idea that it's pretty decent, a lot of it. I don't care sounds very negative, but it's more in a way of liberating myself. If I was a professional musician, I would really try not to read reviews with a passion. I would try and avoid them with a passion, I should say.
Absolutely. I mean, you take virtually any really famous composer, and you'll find reviews at the time that slate that composer, and you think, what? You talked about Stravinsky's Rite of Spring or whatever like that? It's just this absolute classic now. So, I mean, it's nonsense.
Yeah, it's just so judgmental. And again, a lot of people will base their ideas of like, should I see this film? Should I see this on a review? And you're immediately being told what to think. Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock, he had a brilliant idea of Janet Leigh is basically the main character for 45 minutes. And then she gets brutally murdered in the shower. Not only the fact that he's making a horror film, but the fact that we've been following this woman for 45 minutes, wondering what's going to happen, because she basically absconds with her employer's money. And then suddenly she's killed and she's out of it. It's like, oh, that story's gone. Oh, hang on, you've killed off your leading lady randomly. And that got terrible reviews. And I mean, we could go on ad nauseum of classic albums and things. Yeah. So keep an open mind, everybody.
Absolutely. And you're right not to take notice of these things. Exactly. Yeah. Well, so I'm going to yet again draw people's attention to the Bandcamp site. Do go to the show notes. Oh dear, there's my 2-year-old making a huge noise with his wooden trolley on a stone floor. Oh dear. Do go over to the show notes for this show, and the links will be there to Bandcamp, to Through Life and Adventures in Retrospect, and also the Glass Onion podcast, and the blog and the YouTube of Antony, where he has a number of presentations, including the Titanic. So thanks. Oh, that noise. Oh, it's irritating. Thanks ever so much, Antony, for coming on. It's been a delight to speak to you. And I think we're going to end with one of those songs we talked about earlier on. Is there anything that you want to say to end with?
Well, a couple of other links, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
I have a SoundCloud page, which is soundcloud.com/Antony without an H, Rotuno, ROTUNNO. That's SoundCloud's a sort of place where I put demos and live performances. And then on YouTube, if you type in the Backfield Plan, that was my band in Madrid, and we've just got tons of. I mean, I'm everywhere now. I've got all my stuff out there in the last few years, so plenty of stuff. Really, yeah. I mean, for anyone writing songs, don't believe what you read and hear. Try not to judge it. Use your instincts, and I have a couple of trusted sounding boards that I send my songs to, and it all comes around to the same thing. All the things we've ever talked about, Julian, is just think for yourself.
Don't trust me. Find out for yourself.
Yeah, I'm a tool as well, so don't trust me.
Exactly. That's right. Good. And I hope we'll have many more conversations, whether you're in India or perhaps back in Spain or in the UK permanently, whatever, wherever you are. I do hope we'll have more conversations, one of which we are planning to be talking about the problems of war, the machine of war, but no doubt other things as well. So I look forward to those conversations. Thank you very much for coming on and for the permission to play your music, which I'm sure we've all enjoyed. So thanks very much, Antony. A pleasure to speak to you as always.
Yeah, you too. Well, thank you very much, because you approached me a few days ago and it was a lovely surprise, especially as I'm just about to leave for 6 weeks. So
all the best.
It's lovely to talk about this because, it does mean a lot to me, and this album was more personal. And as I said right at the top of the conversation, the lady Vesta who did the artwork, she encouraged me to think about themes, and I realised that all these songs do have a personal connection, and that's just a lovely thing to be able to do that.
Smashing.
Get these things out to the world that you want to say as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Good to speak to you again.
All right, all the best.
Guys, come here. Let's tell him it was jet fuel. That's a good one. Yeah, good.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that, listeners. You may have noticed that although this isn't a John Lennon podcast today, there is a hint of John and the Beatles in my music. Obviously, they were a seminal influence, as was Bob Dylan, for example, and a few other people, Simon and Garfunkel. I was very much a 60s guy, even though I was born in 75. Anyways, I've included links to my music. It's on bandcamp.com. I do invite donations for that. I don't for the podcast at the moment, but if you'd like to put a bit in the online begging bowl, so to speak, that would be much appreciated. Or otherwise, just share the link, Just really trying to share my music, because, it was a lot of effort by myself and others. Thanks to Julian once again for inviting me on his show back in July. I'll also put links to his show. The website is themindrenewed.com. So check that out. It's not a music podcast. It's really a range of things. I've appeared on there 5 or 6 times, and as he said, we've talked about all kinds of things, but he goes into some very, very interesting topics, and there's a real wide range. And as you can hear from Julian's voice, he's a very empathetic person, and his approach is very measured and fact-based, I'm going to say, but at the same time encouraging people to, listen to their heart. There's a very nice episode he did a few years ago, actually, called Holding Things Lightly. In fact, I'll put a link to that as well. So the next episode is going to be another bonus. So it's my appearance on a Beatles podcast. Very exciting. The first time I've ever appeared on a Beatles show as a guest, called When They Was Fab. So I'm going to get that out next Friday. And then, as I said, we'll return to the normal format in 2 weeks with a review of the Imagine film from 1972, the John and Yoko sort of music videos film, which accompanied John Lennon's Imagine album and Yoko Ono's Fly album. So anyways, have a wonderful week, and see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.